A pristine alabaster silhouette cuts a path through the void, creating an elegant contrast to the surrounding darkness as it moves. It was manufactured by a company that prides itself in its sense of style, sophistication, and a refined grandeur that can be found within all of their ship designs. This vessel takes luxury and seamlessly blends it together with all the elements that are necessary for exploration. It's a ship for adventurers who want to travel the stars, but also plan on being able to do it in style. This is the 600i from Origin Jumpworks. Out along the fringes of the system, a heavily armored space hulk can be seen moving through an expanse of perpetually tumbling asteroids. It's just returned from a month-long journey that took it out past the last ring of beacons that marks the borders of UEE-claimed space. Its hull is loaded with exotic salvage, numerous samples have been packed and bound for scientific study, and databanks that have been filled to capacity, all chronicling new discovery points for specialized ships to venture out and further investigate on their own. This is the Anvil Carrick. Both of these vessels are considered by their manufacturers to be top-tier explorer ships. They're very similar when it comes to their crew size. They're both multi-deck vessels and are as big on the inside as they look from the outside. They're both classified as being large ships, and they have the same focus when it comes to their intended career path. But that's where these similarities end. These ships take a rather divergent fork in the road when it comes to their approach to and what their definition of exploration is. But that is, after all, one of the main purposes for these Versus episodes, is to take and compare two ships that perform the same task but go about doing it in very different ways. I've often heard the 600i as being referred to as the Gentleman's Carrack, and I know that's a very fitting way to describe it, because the focus of that ship has obviously been placed on the level of comfort that it can provide its passengers while they're exploring. It's futuristic glamour camping at its finest. And Origin does everything that they can to make sure that being light years away from home isn't going to matter, because the 600i is going to bring its own slice of civilization along with it. The Carrack, on the other hand, takes a polar opposite approach to exploring the universe. If the 600i is glamour camping, then the Carrack would best be described as a survivalist. Everything about it is a single-minded focus on bringing with it only what it's going to need to keep the journey going after its access to the things that most other ships depend on has been cut off. This isn't very surprising, seeing how the Carrack was designed for military use, and a good portion of the surplus Carracks that are currently for sale are actually decommissioned military ships that have been stripped down and repurposed for sale to the civilian market. So many of these ships have already seen their fair share of action out there along the rim. That alone makes it more appealing to some people, for the same reasons why collectors pay inordinate amounts of money to get their hands on authentic historical artifacts, because it ties them to the event, making them in its own particular way a part of it on some level. Each Carrack in its own right is a living piece of history that for over a decade now has stood above all others as the symbol for human exploration. The service records for these decommissioned Carracks have been classified, so no Carrack owner is going to be able to know what the history for their particular ship is. But that only seems to add to the mystique and the appeal of these vessels. For all a buyer knows, their ship could have been the one that was used to discover any number of the various systems that the UEE now claims as their own. So owning a Carrack not only allows a civilian to be an explorer, but also to be a part of the very history of discovery itself. There's also an innate guarantee associated with the Carrack since this was made for military use, which means that it wasn't built cheaply by a contractor that was trying to underbid their competition. It was meant to be functional at the expense of cost and was constructed to guarantee that despite how much damage it took, that no matter what events unfolded before it, that it would bring its crew back alive. And it's that military-grade level of ruggedness that the civilian populace is betting on when they pick a Carrack as their chosen explorer ship. It's a vessel that's been already tested in the crucible of space and has come back to tell the tale. And their main approach to exploring isn't the only difference that exists between these ships. Another large discrepancy between them lies in the components that drives each vessel. Despite its focus on design, interior layout, comfort, and weaponry, the 600i still seems to be lacking when it comes to the size of its components. Components are what an engineer would consider to be the very heart of the ship. Now, don't get me wrong, everything that's been put into this vessel is adequate for running its basic operations, but that doesn't change the fact that you have a rather large multi-tiered ship that's being driven by nearly all medium-sized components. The only exception to this is the large power plant that it has. And in its defense, if you're going to have one component that's going to be larger than the rest, then that component should really be the power plant. The Carrack is a lot more of a powerhouse when it comes to what it has under the hood. It's equipped with all large components, and although there are some individual exceptions to this, as a general rule it takes 3 lesser components to equal one of a larger size. So it would take 3 small components to equal a medium one, and 3 medium ones to equal a large one, and so on. That means that the Carrack not only has a higher level of functionality coming from its components, but they're also going to be all exponentially higher than what you'd find running the 600i. Here's something that's going to be a huge plus for the 600i, and it's the way that its weapons have been set up. The pilot has access to 3 fixed size 5 guns that are mounted onto the front of the ship. They're also going to have an allotment of 16 size 3 missiles at their disposal. For my taste, size 3 missiles are the best combination of damage potential and cost effectiveness. They're going to be the bare minimum in size that you're going to want to have if you're planning on crippling if not flat out killing an attacker rather than just warding them off. The 600i puts a lot of firepower in the hands of the pilot, which is something that you're going to want to have if you're flying with a minimal sized crew or if you're out there piloting the ship by yourself. It also has an additional 2 remote turrets that are armed with a pair of size 2 guns each. One extends from the bottom of the ship and faces forward, while the other is mounted onto the upper deck and faces the rear of the ship. Of course, it's going to be better to have them than to not have them, but I look at these turrets as being more of a way to fill in the blind spots that the ship has so you can prevent would-be attackers from getting on your 6 and relentlessly hammering at your shields. But they're not necessarily game changers when it comes to the amount of firepower that they can dish out. The Carrack's weapon systems are both its strength and its weakness. The pilot doesn't have access to any of the ship's weaponry, and it doesn't come with any missiles by default or any other offensive options that the pilot can take control of. This may change once the ability to blade out turrets becomes a reality, but for now this is not a ship that you want to be piloting by yourself when trouble happens to find you. The ship has 4 turrets, each of which are equipped with a pair of size 4 weapons. Their placement allows for overlapping fire from at least 3 turrets along any given side of the ship. I personally find the Carrack's turrets to be arguably the best designed ones that are found in the game right now. They extend out and away from the vessel, which gives them a wider range of movement like the ones you'd find on the Hammerhead. And they also just have that old school sci-fi look to them that I find particularly appealing. All of the unique features that the 600i has which specifically pertain to exploration can all be found within its exploration module. This module is divided up into 2 floors. On the top floor you'll find a pair of dedicated scanning stations and an oversized hologlobe. Beneath is where several niches can be found that are used to carry additional cargo. The bottom deck is also where the unique rover that comes bundled along with the Explorer module is stored. This area also has a lift that's lined with maglocks, so it can secure the rover on it during travel and can be used to lower it out through the belly of the ship. The lift doesn't provide a lot of alternative options when it comes to other vehicles that it can carry, but I can confirm that among the drivable vehicles that are in the game right now, it'll comfortably hold a single Cyclone, a Dragonfly, or 2 Noxes. You can take them off the lift and park some of these vehicles around the periphery of this room's interior, but you're going to be taking things into your own hands if you do. One feature that hasn't been implemented into the game yet is the sudden rush of momentum that a player is going to experience when the ship first jumps into quantum, and again when it returns to its normal cruising speed. Think of that scene in Spaceballs when they jump to ludicrous speed to get a feel for what I'm talking about. That's what's supposed to happen, and anything that isn't tied down, secured in a seat, or locked onto a grid is going to be given the dark helmet treatment. The upper floor of the Carrack's 2-story bridge is a near carbon copy of what the upper floor of the 600i's Explorer module has to offer. They both have 2 dedicated scanning stations and a hologlobe that can be used for command and control functions. Both of their flight decks have a near identical makeup as well, consisting of a pilot seat that's flanked on either side by additional support stations. The rest of the 600i's interior is focused on providing creature comforts for its passengers. This includes a fully stocked bar and a mini lounge area, all of which is set underneath a huge window that extends for nearly the entire length of the ceiling. The lower deck of this area has a small theater that can seat 2 people at a time. It's adjacent to a pool room that provides a modicum of privacy for a small group of people to gather and play a few rounds together. And on the far side of the floor is a large kitchen area that has everything that a self-respecting chef would need to store, prepare, and cook the ingredients that are needed to turn food into culinary works of art. The Carrack dedicates the rest of its space to functions that are directly tied to exploration. It has things like an onboard repair room that can be used for fixing damaged components or broken equipment. It has a medical bay that can heal injured crew members. And it can also be used as a spawn point so that, just in case something happens to a member of your party, they'll reappear in the Carrack's medical bed instead of waking up in the hospital of some landing zone. Which, depending on your situation, could end up being halfway across the galaxy from where you currently are. It has a drone room that's going to have a lot of additional gameplay options associated with it, which will include being able to self-repair the ship, transport fuel back and forth between vessels, and possibly being able to resupply spent ammunition for your scout ship and vehicles. Its cartography room is going to be used for charting out a path for the expedition, and can be used as a command and control center to organize fleet activity from. So, why would you want a 600i Explorer over the Carrack? There's going to be a lot of gameplay elements that are tied in with the exploration career path that the 600i is going to be perfectly capable of undertaking. which is going to include being the first rung in the land claiming and outpost construction mechanic. It's also going to have a hand to play in being the first step in nearly every other major career path. For instance, it could discover asteroids that are rich in a particular vein of ore that any number of mining ships can then excavate. It can find derelict vessels for salvagers to harvest, and it can discover and record the location of untouched hydrogen clouds that tanker ships can use to scoop and refine fuel from. All these finds can be exploited for personal gain, or their locations can be sold to either an information broker or to private individuals for profit. There's going to be a lot of downtime that the crew is going to have while traveling out to discovery sites, and the 600i is going to offer some interesting ways to help fill that time. You could sit down and watch a vidcast or two, play a couple of rounds of pool on a regulation-sized pool table, or perhaps you could satiate your appetite with some fine dining that could be enjoyed while admiring the view from one of its huge windows and numerous lounge seats. Or if you want, you could just go and get tanked at the bar. The 600i is also going to be a lot better suited for people who want to fly around in a large ship but don't want to be dependent on a large crew to operate it. A solo pilot will still have access to 90% of its offensive weaponry, which includes its main guns and its rather large supply of missiles. It may not have a dedicated garage and a scout bay like the Carrack, but it can carry a rover, and a rover is going to arguably be the most useful alternative vehicle for an explorer ship to have. The 600i is also going to have a degree of modularity to it. The Explorer insert can be swapped out for a touring module, so if you ever get tired of exploration, you can quickly switch career paths without having to switch vessels. Another thing that the 600i has going for it is that this ship is a really good backdrop for role players. It has a lot of well-constructed set pieces that can be used for a variety of situations. It also doesn't hurt that each location is extremely well lit, and it has a lot of open windows that can be used for establishing shots that can visually indicate where the scene's taking place. The Carrack may have many options, but not a single one of them are going to be an open bar or a lounge area, and the crew doesn't get fine dining, they get chow. The Carrack's captain certainly isn't going to get this kind of a view from their cabin or find anywhere near this level of extravagance within their private quarters. And likewise, the Carrack's crew isn't going to get this kind of a view from the flight deck. The 600i's bridge has one of the most open and unobstructed views that you'll find among any of the other ships of its size. It's the one thing that you can depend on all Origin ships having, and it's something that I personally love about their design. The only real issue that people have had with the 600i's flight deck is the amount of wasted space that's found in the rear portion of it. I prefer to think of it as space that's been purposely left open for the player to fill with items of their own choosing once interior hardpoints have been introduced into the ship. And why would you want a Carrack rather than a 600i Explorer? The Carrack takes a lot more serious approach to exploration. The 600i is going to be able to remain out in the expanse for extended amounts of time, and it's going to be able to travel out past the range of most other vessels. But the Carrack is going to be able to go out even further than that, and for longer periods of time. This means that its discoveries are more likely to be untouched and potentially a lot more valuable. Plus, there's an extra benefit to being the first one to come across a new find, and it's that you can cherry pick the best pieces from it before you sell its coordinates to somebody else. That means if there's a unique weapon hanging off a derelict craft, you could salvage it using the Carrack's drones, or drain it dry of quantum and hydrogen fuel. You could go through it and collect any stray pieces of unique armor or weapons from the armory that catches your attention, and if it has some high quality components, you could take them for yourself as well. And the Carrack is going to have plenty of room to store all of these things that you end up coming across. The Carrack has triple the amount of protection from its shields than the 600i does. It's heavily armored and has a fortified hull, which opens up a lot more possibilities and hazardous environments for it to be able to explore. Its garage is big enough to be able to carry a variety of ground-based vehicles you could pick and choose from, so you can be prepared for whatever types of unique terrain that the locations you'll be visiting will have to offer. You can also utilize a scout ship, which is going to give you even more creative options to choose from in order to overcome unique obstacles. The Carrack is a far more self-sufficient vessel thanks to features like its large fuel scoops, the repair room, the medical bay, the drone room, and the cartography deck. And the Carrack is going to have even more modularity depending on what kinds of optional cargo pods end up becoming available for it. Another good thing about the Carrack is if you ever get tired of exploring and want to switch gears for a little while, then the Carrack can double as a very capable cargo hauler. So, I'd recommend the 600i Explorer for people who want a top-tier exploration ship that can be easily run by a crew of 1 to 3 people. It's going to be perfect for solo pilots or anyone who has a limited number of friends that they can play with. It's also going to be a great choice for people who are interested in both the exploration and passenger transport career paths, and want to be able to do both of these things without having to buy 2 ships. The ship is also going to be perfect for people who want to explore but don't have a lot of time to play the game, and don't want to spend a majority of their game playing session traveling through deep space in order to get to a single point of interest. For those people, it's not going to matter that this ship isn't as long range as the Carrack, and it wouldn't matter that it doesn't have access to certain features that only the Carrack has, which wouldn't end up being utilized anyway during shorter expeditions. While I'd recommend the Carrack for the more die-hard explorer, it's definitely for people who have more time to invest in the game and are going to have a dedicated crew to help run it. It's built to take on the most challenging types of environments, and it has every tool in the toolbox you're going to need to keep going regardless of what the verse has to throw at you. It's for people who want to spend a lot of time exploring. And when you get sick of doing this, the ship could be used as a very effective long-range cargo hauler. It can also lend its support to deep space search and rescue operations. Or it can essentially act as a heavy supply vessel by using the same barge drones that the Vulcan uses to refuel, repair, or even resupply any ships that require those services. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Versus. I'd like to thank everybody for liking and subscribing, and I'd also like to thank my patrons for their support, because without their help, I wouldn't be able to continue doing this. If you'd like to become a patron, you'll be able to find a link to my Patreon channel in the description of this video. Thanks for watching, and take care.